"Are you lost, Grandpa?" The voice was sharp. It was young. It was laced with the kind of condescending assurance that only comes from a man who has never been truly tested. Sergeant Deckard stood with his arms crossed, a perfect picture of modern military authority. His uniform was crisp, his jaw was set, and his eyes, hidden behind ballistic sunglasses, scanned the old man sitting on a simple wooden stool. The old man did not move. He just sat there, a small, stooped figure against the vast, shimmering heat of the sniper range. His clothes were simple, worn denim and a faded cotton shirt, a stark contrast to the digital camouflage patterns surrounding him. He seemed as out of place as a ghost at a banquet. "Sir, this is a live-fire area," Deckard continued, his voice louder now, as if speaking to someone hard of hearing. "An active training facility for United States Army Rangers. You can't be here." The old man finally lifted his head. His face was a roadmap of deep lines, his skin the color of rich, dark earth. His eyes were not clouded with age, but were clear, dark, and impossibly still. They held a depth that seemed to absorb the harsh sunlight without reflection. He said nothing. Across his lap rested an old rifle. It was long, made of dark, oiled wood and blued steel. It looked ancient, a relic from a forgotten war. The stock was scarred and worn smooth in places from the grip of hands long past. To Deckard, it was an absurdity, a piece of junk, a museum piece that had somehow wandered onto his state-of-the-art range. "And what is that?" Deckard asked, a smirk playing on his lips. He gestured with his chin towards the weapon. "You planning on doing some plinking?" A few of the younger rangers nearby chuckled. They were gods here, masters of windage and ballistics, wielding rifles that were miracles of modern engineering, capable of hitting a target from a mile away. The old man and his wooden firearm were a joke, a welcome bit of levity in a long, hot day of training. The old man's gaze drifted from Deckard to the rifle, and he ran a slow, careful hand along the stock. The gesture was tender, like a man caressing a cherished memory. "I was invited," he said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble like distant thunder. It carried no hint of weakness, only a profound and unshakable calm. Deckard's smirk vanished. He hated that. He hated being contradicted, especially by someone who so clearly didn't belong. It was a violation of the order he so carefully maintained. "Invited? By who?" Deckard scoffed. "The base historian? Right. You and the general, best pals, I'm sure." The sarcasm was thick and dripping with disdain. "This is a restricted area," Deckard pressed, stepping closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. He was invading the old man's space, using his physical presence to intimidate. "I need to see your authorization." Now, the old man simply looked at him. That still, deep gaze was beginning to unnerve Deckard, digging under his skin in a way he didn't understand. It felt like being weighed and measured by something ancient and elemental. "My authorization is on its way," the old man said softly. "Not good enough," Deckard snapped. He felt his authority slipping, and it made him angry. He saw the way some of the other soldiers were watching. This was a test. "That weapon is not authorized on this range. It's a non-regulation firearm. I'm going to have to confiscate it." He reached out. His intention was to simply take the rifle, to end this ridiculous standoff and reassert his control. His fingers, clad in tactical gloves, brushed against the rifle's wooden stock. The touch was a spark. For the old man, the world dissolved. The scent of hot dust and gunpowder was gone. In its place was the thick, cloying smell of jungle rot, of mud, of blood. The sharp crack of modern rifles faded, replaced by the deafening roar of incoming mortars and the frantic chatter of an M60 machine gun. The sun's heat vanished, stolen by a cold, relentless monsoon rain that slicked the very stock Deckard was now touching. He felt the familiar weight of it in his hands, the cold steel against his cheek. He saw the faces of young men, boys really, their eyes wide with terror in the green, hellish light of flares. He was back in the valley, the A Shao Valley. The memory lasted only a second, but it was total. When he returned to the present, something had shifted in his eyes. The stillness was still there, but now it was the stillness of a coiled snake. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply held Deckard's gaze. From a short distance away, Staff Sergeant Reyes watched the confrontation with a growing knot of dread in his stomach. He was older than Deckard, not by much, but enough to have learned that the world wasn't always as it appeared on the surface. He had seen Deckard's type before, all polish and procedure, but with no instinct, no gut. Reyes looked at the old man. He saw the weathered hands, the stooped shoulders that spoke not of weakness, but of carrying heavy burdens for a very long time. He saw the profound, unnerving calm in the face of Deckard's escalating aggression. This was not a lost old man. This was something else, something important. He knew he was overstepping his bounds. He knew this could get him in a world of trouble. But his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive on 3 combat tours, was screaming at him. Reyes discreetly pulled out his personal cell phone. He turned away from the scene, shielding the screen with his body. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number for the division command post. It was a long shot. A crisp voice answered. "Division Command, Sergeant Mills speaking." "Sergeant, this is Staff Sergeant Reyes out at Range 14, he said, keeping his voice low and urgent. "I need to speak with General Vance's aide. It's an emergency." There was a pause. "An emergency?" "Staff Sergeant, the General is in a priority briefing." "I understand that," Reyes insisted, his heart pounding. "But you need to get him a message. There's a civilian on the range. An elderly man. Sergeant Deckard, the RSO, is about to escalate things. A civilian security breach is a matter for the MPs, not the commanding general." The voice on the other end said, dismissive and annoyed. Reyes took a breath. This was it. The point of no return. "The man's name is Silas Kane," he said, speaking clearly. "He's an old black man. He's holding a rifle. It looks like a heavily modified Garand. Please, just give the aide the name. Silas Kane." Dead silence. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound on the line was static. Reyes thought the call had been dropped. He was about to speak again when the voice came back, and it was completely transformed. The annoyance was gone, replaced by a tone of shocking, ice-cold urgency. "Repeat that name, Staff Sergeant." "Silas Kane," Reyes said again. There was a sharp, audible intake of breath. "Hold your position. Do not, under any circumstances, allow that man to be harmed or removed. Keep him there. Do you understand me? The general is on his way." The line went dead. Back at the firing line, Deckard had reached his limit. The old man's silent refusal to yield had become an intolerable challenge to his authority. "That's it," Deckard said, his voice tight with fury. "I'm done asking." He grabbed the rifle. But the old man's hand, weathered and wrinkled, clamped down on the barrel with surprising strength. It wasn't a violent move, but it was absolute. The rifle did not budge. It was as if it were an extension of his own body, rooted to the very earth. "I would not do that, son," Silas Kane said, his voice still quiet, but now carrying a chilling weight. Deckard stared, dumbfounded, at the old man's grip. He was a ranger, in peak physical condition. This frail old man should have been no match for him. Yet, he could not move the weapon a single inch. It was at that moment that the sound began. A distant rumble at first, growing rapidly louder. It was the sound of powerful engines moving at high speed. Every head on the range turned towards the access road. A convoy of 3 black, government-plated SUVs was tearing down the dirt road, kicking up a massive plume of dust behind them. They weren't driving, they were flying. They bypassed the usual checkpoints, their speed a clear sign of extreme urgency. The vehicles screeched to a halt just yards from the firing line, doors flying open before they had fully stopped. Out of the lead vehicle emerged a man who seemed to suck all the air out of the immediate vicinity. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the immaculate uniform of a 4-star general. His chest was a constellation of ribbons and medals. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. It was General Vance, the commanding general of the entire base. His command staff, a collection of colonels and majors, scrambled to keep up as he strode forward. Vance ignored them all. He ignored the range master who was rushing towards him, saluting frantically. He ignored Sergeant Deckard, who had frozen in place, his hand still on the old rifle. The general's eyes, like chips of granite, were locked on one person and one person only. He walked with a terrifying purpose, each step a hammer blow on the dry earth. The air crackled with a tension so thick it was almost visible. The young rangers stood as if turned to stone, their earlier mockery forgotten, replaced by a sense of awe and primal fear. General Vance came to a stop 3 feet in front of the simple wooden stool. He looked at the old, stooped man, and the fury on his face melted away, replaced by an expression of profound, bone-deep reverence. He drew himself up to his full, imposing height. His back went ramrod straight. Then he executed the sharpest, most perfect salute of his 40-year career. His hand sliced through the air and stopped, quivering with precision, at the brim of his cap. His voice, a commander's voice used to booming across entire formations, echoed over the now silent range. It was thick with an emotion that no one present had ever heard from him before. "Mr. Kane," the general roared. "It is an honor, sir." Silas Kane slowly, deliberately, removed his hand from the rifle and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "David," he said softly, "you've gotten old." A small, watery smile touched the general's lips, but he held his salute. He turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping over the stunned and confused faces of the Rangers. He locked eyes with Sergeant Deckard, who looked as if he had just been struck by lightning. "You men look at this man, and you see." "What?" The general's voice boomed. "An old man. A civilian who wandered where he shouldn't be." He paused, letting the question hang in the oppressive heat. "Let me tell you who you are looking at," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, drawing them all in. "You are looking at a living legend. You are in the presence of greatness so profound you lack the imagination to comprehend it." The general's eyes found the old rifle, still resting in Silas Kane's lap. "You see an old rifle. I see a holy relic. You see a piece of wood and steel. I see the instrument that saved my life and the lives of 17 other men." He took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with the ghosts of memory. "In the spring of 1969, in a place called the Ashau Valley, a place so godforsaken we called it the Valley of Death, my platoon was cut off and overrun. We were dead. Every single one of us was dead and just waiting for the enemy to finish the job. I was a young lieutenant then, pinned down behind a rotten log, with enemy fire cutting the air to pieces all around me. The range was utterly silent. The only sound was the wind. For 3 days and 3 nights, the general said, his voice now a raw, emotional whisper, hellfire rained down on us. And for 3 days and 3 nights, a ghost on the ridge above us rained down hellfire of his own. We never saw him. We just heard him. We just heard this thunderclap." He gestured with his chin at the old rifle. "One shot. One kill. An enemy sniper at 800 yards. A mortar crew at 1,000. A machine gun nest at 1,200. Impossible shots, one after another, from a man we couldn't see. He was a phantom, an angel of death protecting us. We called him the Ghost of the Valley." The general finally lowered his salute, but his eyes remained fixed on Silas. When reinforcements finally broke through, they found him, alone, surrounded by the brass casings from hundreds of rounds. He had held off an entire enemy company by himself. That man was Sergeant Silas Kane. "And this," he said, pointing a trembling finger at the rifle, "is the weapon he did it with. Not a museum piece. A custom-built, hand-tuned instrument of salvation that he made himself. The ballistics of which our best minds at Aberdeen still can't fully replicate." He turned his full attention to Sergeant Deckard. The general's face was once again a mask of fury, but this time it was cold, precise, and absolutely terrifying. His voice dropped to a quiet, lethal register that was more frightening than any shout. "You, Sergeant," he hissed, "stand there in your perfect uniform, with your perfect knowledge of regulations. You are an expert in rules, but you know nothing of honor. You see age and you assume weakness. You see history and you assume irrelevance." Deckard was pale, his face ashen. He was trembling. "Sir, I was just enforcing range safety protocols." "You were enforcing your own arrogance." Vance cut him off, his voice like cracking ice. "You stood in the shadow of a giant and tried to measure him with your own pathetic yardstick. You disgraced your uniform. You disgraced this unit. You saw an old man. I see the man who taught us the meaning of the word ranger long before most of you were even born." The silence that followed was crushing. Deckard looked as if he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. His smug certainty had been stripped away, leaving behind only raw, naked shame. It was Silas who broke the silence. He slowly pushed himself to his feet. He seemed to have grown in stature. The stoop was still there, but it now looked less like the bend of age and more like the curve of a longbow, still holding its tension. "David," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Be easy on the boy. He's young. He follows the rules he was given. A good soldier follows rules." He turned his dark, still eyes to Deckard. "The rules are there to keep you safe, son. But wisdom is what keeps you alive. And wisdom begins with respect, not for the rank or the uniform, but for the journey that got a man to where he is standing." General Vance stared at Silas for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He was not going to countermand a lesson from his savior, but there would still be a reckoning. "Sergeant Deckard," the general said, his voice back to its commanding tone. "You and your entire platoon will report to the base historian tomorrow morning at 0600. You will begin a mandatory 2-week course on the history of this unit. The final lesson will be a detailed tactical and ethical breakdown of the Ashau Valley stand of 1969. And from this day forward, that course will be known as the Kane Protocol. It will be required for every ranger who sets foot on this base. Is that understood?" "Yes, General," Deckard choked out, his voice cracking. "Now," the general said, his tone softening as he turned back to Silas. "Mr. Kane, you were invited here today to demonstrate something. If you're still willing." Silas Kane nodded. He walked past the general, past the shamed Sergeant Deckard, and onto the firing line. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace. The young rangers parted for him like the sea before Moses. He laid down on the mat, settling in behind his old rifle. He didn't use any of the modern scopes or digital wind gauges. He simply squinted, judged the heat shimmer with his naked eye, and settled the rifle into his shoulder. "Target," he said quietly. 2,000 yards. A gasp went through the crowd. 2,000 yards was an extreme distance, a shot reserved for the most powerful 50 caliber rifles with advanced computer-aided scopes. For an old iron-sighted rifle, it was not just impossible. It was laughable. The range master, on a hand signal from the general, punched the command into his console. Far, far down the range, a steel silhouette target, barely a speck to the naked eye, flipped into view. Silas Kane took a single, slow breath. He held it. The world seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, the rifle spoke. It wasn't the sharp, supersonic crack of the modern rifles. It was a deep, resonant boom. A thunderclap that rolled across the valley, a sound straight out of history. For a long second, nothing happened. Then, a faint, metallic ping echoed back across the range. On the giant monitor displaying the target feed, a perfect hole appeared directly in the center of the target's chest. One shot. A cold-bore shot. 2,000 yards. He had silenced them all. Months passed. Sergeant Deckard was a changed man. The Kane Protocol had done its work. He had learned the stories, the history, the sacrifices that were the true foundation of his uniform. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, thoughtful humility. One rainy afternoon, he was in the base library, researching for a paper for a college course he had started. He looked up and saw Silas Kane sitting in a worn armchair by the window, reading a book of poetry. Deckard's heart hammered in his chest. He took a deep breath, stood up, and walked over. He stood respectfully until the old man looked up. "Mr. Kane," Deckard began, his voice quiet. I never properly apologized for my conduct on the range that day. There's no excuse for it. I was ignorant, and I was arrogant. I am truly sorry." Silas Kane closed his book, marking his page with a finger. He looked at the young sergeant, and a genuine, warm smile touched his lips. It transformed his weathered face, making him look years younger. "Apology accepted, Sergeant," he said. "You have learned. That is all that matters." "I have, sir," Deckard said, his voice thick with emotion. "I really have." Silas patted the chair next to him. "Sit a moment. Let me tell you something an old sergeant told me when I was your age. He said the heaviest things a soldier carries are not his rifle or his pack. They are the stories of the men who came before him, and the respect he owes their memory. You carry that weight well, son, and you'll be a fine leader." Deckard sat, and for the next hour, he just listened, as the quiet hero in the library shared a small piece of his infinite wisdom. The lesson was finally and truly complete.